Hello, and welcome to the Simply WoW podcast, where three simple guys talk about WoW. Today we'll be tackling the not at all heavy or personal topic of guild management and follow up about raid management in particular. As always, I'm Meeps, and with me is Rise.
How's it going?
And Jay.
Sup, fuckers?
So,
Well done.
Let's just start with the easy part. What is the biggest trap in guild management?
Jay, I think you should start with this one because I think you've been in that position the longest, yeah?
Okay, there's a lot. So it's gonna be hard to just pick one. You know what? I think I'll take the low-hanging fruit, the easy one, and if I think of something better, then I'll revise my answer. But I'll say the biggest trap is when you hit your roster size that you want and you feel like you're good. You take the foot off the gas as far as like recruiting goes. That's the biggest trap.
Okay. Can you go a little bit in depth why specifically?
Sure.
Because, from my position, I've very rarely been in a officer position when we've hit that kind of sweet spot roster size. I do agree with it, but I'm curious about your standpoint or your perspective on it. Because I know one thing that we've said in Silo is that we'll always be willing to look for friends and offer them a trial, or we're always willing to trial top quality raiders. But I do believe that there is a point where it hits a mark, and you should keep it there.
Yeah, I think specifically the trap is being if you're in a position where you're like, okay, Mythic is 20 men or women, 20 raiders. Sorry. Mythic is 20 raiders, and you go, okay, how many do we need to fill Mythic? 20. Okay, cool. So once we have 20 people, we're good.
Not.
That kind of is the trap, because you might have everybody on every night, but then if one person misses, you're not doing Mythic.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're doing Mythic, undermanned or under... You won't have a full roster. And depending on the... I don't want to say quality, but that's probably the best word. Depending on the quality of your raiders, that can either be completely disastrous or it can be totally fine. I think that also depends on the boss that you're going up against as well. Perhaps the mechanics that are involved in it. But yeah, that's kind of what I mean by the trap, because if you set yourself as a roster of 20 and then you get there and you're like, okay, cool, we can relax, that is a huge issue, because if one person posts out, you're kind of fucked. And on the other side of that, you also do run into the issue where if you set your limit to let's have 22 or 23, and somebody has an issue within the guild and, one or two people leave, that can put you down to that spot. And then you're freaking out because you're like, well, we have only 20. So if somebody posts out, we're kind of done. Then you're back in that freaking out spot. And I think for me, that's probably the trap that I think of immediately when kind of think of that question, because of the whole aspect of you could be totally fucked just by one person not being there. I mean, not that they would intentionally fuck you over, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that.
But then you hit a roster of 25, 26, and then you have 5 post outs one week, and you panic and you just keep recruiting on up to 30.
I feel like sometimes
it's definitely a concern. I mean, that's the tricky part about management, is you don't want to have 20, and then you don't want to go all the way to 30, because then 10 people are always sitting.
Yeah. Well, that is actually a very real scenario, and that's something that you specifically brought up because we had to deal with that a couple times. One thing that's
true at all.
Oh yeah, not true at all. I guess one of the things to think about is when you're ever put in a weird position like that, you have the ability to trial more people. It's completely up to you. You have to make a decision whether at that point is it realistic and are the trials available, and also you have to consider what kind of trials are you taking. Are you taking any random person to fill a gap? Because sometimes that can be pretty rough. Or are you trying to still, find the top players? In which case, if everyone comes back, then are you going to keep the fresh new trial, or are you going to try to go for someone that was there for a while and has been solidified on the roster? And that's where it can also get into some pretty hairy spots. My opinion, if you're ever in that spot, I feel like it's best, at least as far as what we do, and I don't think we've necessarily talked about this, it's been really good to just ask people if they have friends that want to come and help us out. Because when we have like a friend come in, they can trial, they cannot trial, whatever, but at least we're not necessarily picking up someone right away. And we've actually had a lot of people that have trialed from that, which has been even more beneficial for us. So I think it kind of goes multiple different ways. You just have to be careful about it.
Right, and that in particular, like you said, they don't even have to trial, and having someone that's already a friend of someone in the guild come trial is usually a good thing. Just bring in more friends.
Mm-hmm. I guess. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
I was gonna say, the thing about friends though that can be a trap in its own is if you get too much of that. If you have your roster, let's say you have 20 or whatever, and somebody posts out, and I go, "Hey, Kyle, do you have a friend that's available to fill in for tonight?" And then that friend is like, "Yeah, I'll fill in for tonight." And then whether they're not explicitly told, like, this is just for tonight and we might call you again if we need you, like they might log on the next day and be like, "So am I back in today?" And all of a sudden, like, I feel like because they're friends, they might think that they're skipping the line as far as like apping goes and not strictly just helping us out that one time or however many times it's needed. So that can also be its own trap too. So you do have to be kind of careful with that. But I think the system that we've tried to implement, where our philosophy per se is obviously we just want to play with the people that we want to play with at the highest level that we can play. So for us, that's Mythic with our friends of Mythic Raiders. We're not going to bring somebody who's not capable of Mythic if we can help it. Sorry,
which is its own topic.
Such a smirk.
It's our own topic. Another topic within Psy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, what can you do? But I think that can also be a trap. But the way that we have it set up, where we can have a friend come in or fill up or whatever with us, that's totally fine too. And I think it depends on how you structure it in order to make that work. And I think we do it well, but maybe not perfectly. I mean, nobody's going to be perfect, but I think we try and avoid those traps as much as possible.
I think that's realistic to say.
Yeah.
Rise, what do you think? You agree with Jay on what the biggest trap is? You have one that comes to mind?
Well,
Give me a new trap. Trap.
One of the traps that I experienced, and I know Meeps and Jay, actually, both you guys will be able to attest or support my theory on this. I've been in an officer position, not as a GM position, of the previous guild, and the problem that I had with that previous GM is that they made all the decisions by themselves. I think it is very healthy to hear the other opinions and things that people have to say, because sometimes, psychologically speaking, when someone's thinking about something, they might not be seeing it from all the angles or all the perspectives. They might be tunnel visioning into it and seeing it based on their previous reasonings or stuff like that. So when you have a group of officers that can help you make a decision, or when you ask a group of officers a question, or when an officer asks another officer opinions on something that maybe they're a part of, you can really iron out all the opinionated portions of it. You can get feedback, really good constructive feedback from people that are also in a similar position to you, whether or not it's the exact same officer role or if it's a GM role or whatever. But that is one of the most important things that I have valued. And the biggest trap, again, I would say, is that if you're going to make a decision, I would always recommend for any officer, regardless of whatever they're an officer for, is to always, bring up the question, ask about it, and try to get some feedback about it. Because sometimes you don't always make the best decision. I feel like having a counsel to help you out with that is always the smarter play. What do you two think about that trap?
I think there's a sub trap you're not thinking of, but I'll let Drew go first.
I think we are specifically built. I think size leadership is specifically built to counter that. Like, that's one trap that we've never ran into, but I think we've all three of us have definitely experienced it before, and so we take an input not only from all the officers and consider that, but the raiders as well. Anyone that's a part of the guild has input on anything that we're doing. It may be someone ending up making the decisions. Like Jay, for instance, has the final say on anything raid related. Rise has the final say on anything guild related. I have the final say if I'm angry enough on anything.
Total veto powers.
But that's after we've taken into consideration all the voices that want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I think there's the sub trap that I'm thinking of was when you were talking about making sure that you have an officer core kind of set up to bounce voices off of. There's two things to think of. There are some guilds that, and this is not true for everyone, this is probably the exception, not the rule, but there are some guilds that work very well with one person in charge, hair dictator. He does everything, everybody just listens to him, and you get it done. Some guilds can work like that. I personally don't know of any current guilds that are ran like that, but like we talked about in the history of where we all came from. In the end result, there was Linksys and his brother Bloodcraze. He was the main tank. Linksys was the raid leader. Literally, Linksys would give all of us officers our marching orders, and then that's it. There was very little actual discussion. He would just, from literally top down, this is what you're doing, do it. And I'm sure he talked with his brother outside of raid, in person, because they were brothers. But that can work. But I think it also depends on, unfortunately, the culture as a whole that we live in nowadays. You can't really get away with that because, and this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but everybody has an opinion and everybody is super important. Except when you're talking to anyone else. As in, I'm super important and my opinion is super important to me, but it might not be to you two. So that's something that, unfortunately, people just got to check their ego at the door. And they got to realize that that's not exactly helpful. Mm-hmm. When you're able to check your ego at the door, like, our current officer corps does, it's fantastic. The other side of that trap is having the officers, you have to make sure that you get ones, they don't have to be the most vocal. We have probably one of the quietest officers in the history of World of Warcraft guilds in Ponju. He rarely speaks. When he does, we all listen because it's something important. Aside from that, if he doesn't need to say anything, he won't. And there's some people that can do that and can't do that. It's great that he's able to command a room like that, but in the history of Psy, we've had officers where, whether it was their job to just do this one thing, maybe they didn't do that. Who knows? Or maybe they just not contribute anything to the conversation as a whole. Mm-hmm. I've been in that position where I've not contributed anything. I've just literally floated with an officer tag and been like, yeah. I'm sure both of you two have as well. But that is something, a sub-trap within that once you pick what kind of style of leadership you're going to go with, you have to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with people that, A, aren't going to be an echo chamber for you. Us three, we are three distinctly different people as far as rating, as far as what we enjoy, everything about us, except for maybe like our shared love of pizza, for example. We're very different, and we're able to have very different conversations. Well, we're able to have the same conversation with very different viewpoints and come to a divide, or come to a point where we can, instead of dividing, come together and be like, okay, this is the important part that we need to think about. How do we achieve that?
Yep.
If you don't have that, that is a huge thing. So,
yeah. Well, also, bringing up like Ponju being quiet, for example, like I think it's still noteworthy to talk to, Ponju and like having their officer meetings, even though he's quiet. You know, if there's any point where one of us, like from Jay, your raid lead perspective, or me as GM perspective, I can say, "Hey, Ponju, what do you think about this?" And he'll immediately chime in. And what he usually says isn't always, you know, what we've been talking about. He gives his own actual unique input. So that's like another just reason to just back up the previous claim. It's just it doesn't matter who they are. Like even Nick, he's usually a bit more quiet a lot of the times, but when we ask him a question, he usually pumps out pretty good, reliable feedback from us. So,
yeah.
You know, even there's also been times where even people as like a raider perspective, they can do that. Like I remember when Ponju was just a raider before, and that like when all of a sudden he was chiming in and doing all these things was like, okay, yeah, he definitely seems like he knows what's going on, and when maybe we can see his point of view because maybe we weren't seeing it before, that kind of thing. So you do have to be careful though, necessarily, because that was something I was going to go into maybe a little bit later about always listening to raiders, because sometimes that can get you into a trap too. Right. I feel like it's also important as just another little trap to say on the side is that usually if the guild makes a plan, you guys want to follow it, and you really need to try hard to make sure that no one can sway the officers any differently. Like especially with like how we the best example I would say is how we approached our current tier and how we wanted to build Psi in our current iteration. We wanted to build it for the purpose of being good in Shadowlands. So when we did that, we were recruiting under that assumption. We got people that are really friendly, that want to be here. They're not necessarily every single one of them wants to push really hard, but that helped us build a really solid community, and that just makes us stronger as a group.
Right.
Yeah, there's also a really interesting thing about that, where we had decided what we were going to do for Shadowlands, as you said, and we start getting those like-minded people. We, shed some people along the way that maybe didn't quite fit into that mold. But you brought up bringing up a plan and sticking to it. As soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna hear some shit about Carapace." And I have learned in the last 2 weeks that when you make a plan, literally just stick to that. Like, I said in officer chat, like, "Hey, if we get to Carapace before break, we'll go and put some temps on just to get through phase 1 because it's really easy to explain phase 1, and we'll just learn it." We get to Carapace and we got an hour left, and I'm like, all right, I think we're gonna be done here. And one of the raiders, I won't out him, but says, "Really? We're just gonna waste an hour? Come on, let's at least just go poke it a couple times." And I'm like, nah, okay, fine. Sometimes that's okay. In that situation, I don't think it hurt us. In fact, I mean, it kind of helped because we haven't wiped in phase 1 since. Once or twice, but that's stupid fluky deaths where I'm just like, fuck it, wipe it. If you allow that to happen a lot, that is when you start running into huge issues. So
yeah, I think that's fair.
And the trap that I was going to come up with is know the responsibility that you're getting into whenever you take on any kind of leadership or management position in a guild. So all three of us have been GM or raid lead of Psi, depending on what's going on with the guild, where we're at in our lives, and like what kind of responsibility we can deal with at that time. There's a reason that I've only been the GM whenever Psi was formed. I haven't taken it since. I've been raid lead at one point, and now Jay, you refuse to be GM on this go around.
Well, for BFA, I was like, I don't want the drama. I don't want to deal with anything. We'll go into why I don't want to be a GM or didn't want to be. I'm okay with it now, but there's reasons as to why, which we can get into, but I'll let you finish your point.
But no, I mean, that was it. Like, there are reasons that like we have it set up the way we do now is because of the trap of, we've all experienced the trap of, well, this is too much for me at the moment, and I jumped into it not realizing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can also be a trap too, a pretty big one. I think that's probably why a majority of guilds fails, because somebody will be like, yeah, I want to run a guild, and then they get into it, and then you get overwhelmed very quickly. When everything's going great, it's fantastic. It's the best thing in the world in World of Warcraft, in my opinion. Better than prog rating, better than hitting a new high in arena. any achievement you can think of, and I don't just mean like, achievement pops up, hey, you got 10 extra internet points. I mean actual, like, something you can be proud of later on. More important than all that, when it goes badly, it goes bad, and it's all on you. And I think that's when most guilds crumble. So when you have a merger go badly and 3 or 4 people leave, that can feel fucking terrifying as a GM, because you're like, oh shit, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Oh my god, everybody's looking at me now. And if you're not ready for it, whew, it's a kick in the knackers.
Yeah, it can be really stressful. Like, I even remember, like, just as of being GM recently, we've already had a couple times where I've been like, man, this is a shitty situation to feel like I'm in. And, that happens, and it hurts really fucking bad when it happens. And that was just something that when it happened, I just realized, like, oh, I put myself in this position. I guess I have to go through with it because I want, the outcome to be that we're still here. So we're still here primarily because of the want of the game, getting that achievement, making the community, make the friends that you have. So I feel like that's another note on top of which to like put in a positive note of. It's like, as long as you know what you're getting into and as long as you can deal with it, the end result will always be good. You're working towards something you want anyway. I guess since you kind of brought it up, Jay, in kind of a slight point, I guess we could talk about a comment that I wanted to talk about later. But what's something that you feel that people that aren't a part of guild management like should know or need to know? I can start off immediately by saying it was really weird coming into this current tier and being like, yeah, I want to be GM, I want us to raid again, I want us to set up a team, I want us to go into Mythic again, and then realizing the state of the game has been very, very difficult as far as a recruiting standpoint, as far as, returning play, how replayable it is, what kind of things do people want to strive for. As far as like the dungeons, people that came into Mythic Plus, the dungeons have been stale or have felt stale. Obviously, new affixes each week, and then the new seasonal affix have kind of changed that a little bit. But it's hard when you're like, oh, this is the 1.5 point, the new patch came out. Do I really want to do more Mythic Plus now that it's been revamped and I have to regrind all my 15s and stuff, or all my 20s or whatever my previous IO was because it's been reset? It's rough. Getting into a new raid tier, it might be fun, but then there's like a million new things that you have to do in order to catch up. Like if you're bringing in a new character and you're really behind, we've already talked about last time getting all the essences, corruption, all that crap to make yourself playable. It feels like a chore, and that's demoralizing. And then on top of which, looking at it and being like, oh, well, guild's already solidified. It's the end of the expansion, all of these other reasons. There's not a lot of new people coming back to the game, and there's a steady stream of people that are leaving the game. It was really hard to like find a raid team. And it was really discouraging for a while when we were at I think we were at 13 people, and we were on Heroic N'Zoth with just kind of this weird feeling of like, we're going to be here for a while, aren't we? Because we just can't get the numbers in order to do that. And that was something that some of our raiders were like, why can't we go into Mythic? Why can't we do all these things? It's like, well, maybe you're not seeing it from our standpoint, but it's really hard at that in particular moment from like a management perspective to be like, yeah, we just finished clearing Heroic. We have another raid night this week, but we're not doing anything. You guys can take Wednesday off because we don't have enough people. Mythic isn't cross-realm yet. We literally, it's not reasonable. So I think that's something that people have to think about is like the state of the game can affect like a raid roster and a raid position, especially at the beginning or the end of a tier. So that would just be one example of things that I don't think every raider or every person thinks about or considers when they're stressed out about why aren't we raiding or why can't we push, why aren't we finding people. It's just something that they don't necessarily think about. What are you guys' takes?
I'll jump in real quick. It might not be quick. Famous last words. Okay, so I think for me, the thing that raiders don't think about that they really should is this is going to sound really bad. People generally are selfish. Everybody wants the best interest for themselves. It's true. Everybody is like that, and rightfully so. We're humans. That's what we're going to do. If you're starving to death and I'm starving to death and I've got an apple, my choice is either do I give you the apple or do I eat the apple? Well, my choice is I'm going to eat the fucking apple. Like, there's very few people that aren't like that. So when you have a raid or roster just getting into the Mythic to build on your point, and you get 18 people, and then somebody's like, yeah, I'll trial or whatever, and you've only got 18. They're only thinking about themselves, and they're going, well, I want to be in Mythic. I don't want to be here. I want to be in a Mythic group. So people only generally don't want to be on a roster of 26 because that means they've got a much higher chance of getting sat, but they don't want to be on a roster of like 18 or less. They want to be coming into a guild with 19 people that show up every single day, are never late, have all their raid materials prepared, strategies all done, and they just come in as that perfect slot. As in, your guild needs a marksman hunter, and you play marksman hunter, and everything falls into line, and it's perfect. The world isn't like that. Sorry to burst your bubble, raiders. And so generally people think of like, oh, I'm just wasting my time. It's going to be like 3 more weeks until they get another person or 2 in here. Then we can start Mythic. If I just leave now, I can find another guild. And unfortunately, I think those people end up hopping from guild to guild to guild to guild to guild to never find what they're actually searching for. Whereas if they just stuck it out for a couple weeks, they would have been totally fine. You're muted.
You're muted.
I remember in a little bit of a side tangent, a mysterious episode 0. I don't think we're supposed to talk about it, but one of those things that we recommended, people to do, or told, raiders to do about, how to better themselves to the raid environment. One of them was to be patient. I think we remember talking about that a little bit. Yeah, that ties in perfectly for one of those things.
Yeah.
If you're jumping ship too quick, you're never gonna know what you have, and then it's gonna be gone. Then you're gonna feel really bad.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that's the thing that most people don't think of is that aspect. Because you don't want to sit, and you don't want to not raid. You want to be in a Mythic. So don't think about the fact that if you're coming into an established team, you've got to earn that spot, which I think everybody accepts that. But then once they're in once, they're like, I can never be sat again. And they don't think of it. And I think that's something that, even if they do, they'll eventually figure it out. But it's something that's going to take a lot of time.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I got distracted in the chat too.
I guess then the question would then fall to Meeps. Meeps, from your perspective, what's one thing that you think raiders should know or keep more in mind about like a management position if they haven't been in one?
We're doing shit, okay? That's the number one thing the raiders need to understand. We are doing so much shit that we just don't publicize to you.
I almost went with that answer.
like the amount of logs, like if I wasn't, in an officer capacity, I wouldn't look at logs. I'd just be like, oh, there's my gray parse, let's keep going. But the amount of combing through logs to find out who's doing what and when so we can get the right people for the right encounters at the right time. The amount of looking back of, well, who's been posting out because we need someone reliable for this last push of prog. Just so much of this, the amount of talking things out with the other officers, based on all this information that we have, where do we go from here? Do we set up new things for the raiders to do? On Sundays, we're really busy. Sunday evenings, we've got the Jaina run, we've got the heroic run on Nyalotha, we've got movie night. All that is done because, the only reason any of that happens is because we put in the work and we try things, we work on it. We're doing shit. All right.
That being said, there are certainly some officers that just don't do anything. Looking at you, Nick. No, I'm kidding. For the record, I'm just giving him shit because we have a roster of 27 and we've told him stop recruiting.
Right.
but yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, and to that point, with Carapace, I've now got to make a Carapace Phase 3 picture with everybody's spots where they have to fucking go because it's been such an issue. And a couple people have messaged me like, hey, why don't we just make a picture like this? And I'm like, because that's a lot of work and I don't wanna. that's the honest answer. Because if I'm doing that, that means I'm taking time away from looking at logs and figuring out like, okay, unfortunately, Sad's not going to be here next week. Who gets to fill his spot? Who's it going to be? Are we going to have Mojo in again and see if he can adjust to the changes that he made? Is it going to be Beak again? Are we going to give Nev a shot? Is Lockbread going to come in? Like it's so many things that we've got to consider and think about that people just probably don't think about until they show up, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, this thing, did you do it? It's like there's a lot more going on behind the scenes.
And because of that, like sometimes there's communication that just gets lost. Like this will happen on occasion where we're like, all right, we need to talk to this person about this thing. And then sure, we'll sideline that, and then we'll forget to do that later. It happens from time to time. We don't like it. We especially try to be we try to be transparent with everyone, the entire raid, about what's going on, why we're doing things. We're not trying to hide things from anyone, but sometimes it just gets lost.
Mm-hmm. I also just as a quick side note for that, it's really important to realize that it's that kind of like feedback or like that kind of loss of communication sometimes goes on all the time. It goes on the weekdays when you're not raiding. It goes on at raid nights during raid. It goes on to weekends where you're doing alt night stuff. Like if people ask questions, like there's always times where we're doing something. We're constantly communicating back and forth about, events, post outs, upcoming strategies, upcoming events. There's also some, pointless chatter in there just because we're all, fairly buddy, but like there's a lot that continuously goes on, and it's all the time. It's not just, oh, it's progression time, it's oh, Shadowlands is coming out next amount of time. We have to start thinking about these things. That's why we made the spreadsheet. We have to start thinking about what characters we want to play. So we start debating that together. And, all the other people talking about what they want to do in comp. It was like before when we were starting raiding earlier, like, how are we recruiting? Like, Nick, do you need help recruiting? We're bumping posts. We're, changing our WoW prog history, stuff like that to make sure that we're showing that we're recruiting. So there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. It's not just necessarily right now when it seems that, we're at the peak where we're pushing cutting edge. It's all the time. Right. So that's something else I think goes a little bit lost for some people when they're like, oh, why aren't you replying? And on top of which, we're also people that have our own schedules and our own stuff going on. So sometimes it can get...
You've got lives on top of that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes it can be really busy. I know that I'm not always the best at communicating. I try to be, but man, there are just
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to say it.
Days where I am just busy or tired or I just zone out. I've had days where I don't even look at Discord because I'm so busy, and that can be pretty stressful as well, coming back and seeing like 30 messages because other people are having a conversation. Technically, I need to go and see those.
And then you got to catch up with that. Or even better, worse than that, occasionally you'll get somebody who'll go to bed and wake up 2 hours later and think that it's nighttime and just start blowing up Discord at 6 a.m.
Yep.
Oh.
My life has deteriorated. That's all I can say about that.
To share for the stream, I woke up this morning at 7:15 to a very passive-aggressive comment in the chat channel that we use to talk about this podcast. Like, are you guys logging on? All right, well, if you actually want to get together this weekend, let me know.
Like, wasn't that passive?
I just responded. No, that's the way I read it. But I just responded with, I wake up anytime from now to 15 minutes from now. And he's like, oh, fuck, that's AM.
Yeah, I woke up at 4:30 this morning and thought it was PM all day up until, like, what was it? Yeah, like 9:30. Yeah, it was 9:30 for me because I'm 2 hours after you. Yeah, so for 5 hours I thought it was PM and not AM.
That awkward moment.
So both of these guys got some stressed out texts.
Yeah.
I just woke up and laughed.
Meeps, I'm pretty sure you brought it up a little bit ago as far as like an idea for it, but I'd like to pose a question for the two of you. What do you guys think is like one of the most important aspects as far as managing a guild or like being in like an officer or a management position in a guild?
Open communication.
Damn it.
Yeah, you hit that pretty fucking quick.
Right.
For coming from all the experience that we have, there's, for me, the two most important things are, one, absolute honesty and open communication. That doesn't mean you have to go and tell somebody actively everything that you think about them. But it just means if somebody asks you a question, give them the answer exactly as you see it. They might not like it in the moment, which is why every time we have a new trial come in, I always tell them, hey, feel free to ask us anything you want. Just be aware. Don't ask us anything that you don't want the answer to. Because if you ask us something, we will tell you the answer. You might not like the answer, but we're going to tell you the answer. So be aware.
Especially when Meeps replies to that. When Meep starts talking and you're asking a question, you know it's a bad time.
Yeah. But I think that, I mean, I just use that philosophy in life. Just generally, if somebody asks me a question, I will tell them like my ex-girlfriend would be like, hey, how do these pants make me look? Does my butt look big in this? Be like,
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
It's probably why I'm single, but
that's why she's an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, right? No, but I mean, obviously she knew that going in. We were together for over 7 years, so she knew. But that, honestly, I do that in my personal life now, and I feel like if everybody did that, that'd be fucking awesome. But specifically in a guild, we're playing a game. We don't have the time to futz around in a guild for 40 hours over the next 2 weeks to finally get an answer that, oh, they don't actually think I'm that great of a player. Whoops. Like, it's just much easier if we don't think you're a good enough player for our group, or that you don't fit well or whatever. It's much easier for you if you know that, and then you can go off somewhere else. Or it's much easier for us because then we don't have to worry about damaging your fragile sense of self, or whatever you want. I'm the asshole tonight. I don't know if you guys caught that.
We're playing good cop, bad cop.
Or bad cop, bad cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop, worst cop.
Yes,
exactly. I'll be bad cop, you're worse.
And for me, it's kind of something we touched on earlier. Openness, being open to more ideas, to new ideas, other ideas, not being completely selfish is something that you have to be good at. Not just, and like I said, we've already touched on this. Just don't be like, well, this is what I decide, and it's what we're gonna go with. Your guys' ideas don't matter. Yeah.
And we had touched about that quite a bit earlier, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse on it, but I agree with both of you guys, and that was going to be my 2 points. So I'll try to come up with a third. But I do think it is very important to be straight up open with everyone. And one thing that I have wanted to bring in is for the raiders, it's not just a raid team. We, as a group of people, all are here for the same reason, because it's a great place to come hang out. It's a good way to kind of escape from life, that kind of stuff. But if we're here, I think it is very important for us to keep a good environment. Not super PC. That's not necessarily how it has to be. Not as, just kind of environment that certain people accumulate to if there's like a toxic environment or something like that. But whenever we have people around, or whenever we're bringing people in, I want to make sure that people come in and feel comfortable. And especially if people are problematic or causing problems, that's something that I don't want to deal with from a guild perspective. And maybe that's just the GM side of me currently. But anytime that there's, an environment where people are coming in, whether it's a trial, whether it's a raider that's been gone for a couple weeks, I need to make sure that the environment is healthy for people. And, sometimes it doesn't always seem that way, for like the example would be like how we rag on some people enough, or how we crack jokes like that you want to take this downstairs. Those things can be funny at the time, but at the end of the day, we're all still a group of people, and the management kind of needs to control that and kind of corral that environment and that energy, because that's at the end of the day, we're making a group of people come together as a community, as a family. So that's something that I strive for, on top of trying to be as honest as possible, obviously, and kind of just telling it like it is for some people that need that kind of answer. So that would be my third answer as well to that.
I can also add on another third. I thought one of you guys would jump on this one immediately. That's why I went for my first two. But unity within the leadership.
Oh yeah, that's very important one.
That being said, you guys you don't have to have the same opinions, but you have to have the same goals. So you have to have a clear set goal, and once all the officers agree on what the goal is, then you can have differing opinions on how to get to that goal. But then you have to also have the ability to have the conversations. I said have like 16 times in one sentence. You have to be able to have the conversations in order to progress, whether it's in Raid or whether it's Mythic Plus or whatever it is. Because if you can't have the conversations, then you're never going to have socially that progress, and that's going to hamper your actual killing bosses. Unless you have a super talented roster that just doesn't need to talk to each other, they don't hang out with each other or whatever. Closer bonds make everybody closer. So within the officers, at least, you got to kind of have that unified sense of what you actually are trying to achieve. If everybody's towing in a different direction, you've got no direction.
And
so
to go with that, if an officer makes a decision like to the guild, then the other officers back him up. Like even if you disagree, like say Jay changes his mind. Say if we come up to Carapace, Jay changes his mind. We're gonna just spend this last hour just running our face into it. Officers are behind, like back him 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, the guild will never know the conversation that was had behind the scenes, except for right now. Right. In officer chat, when that happened, there was immediately 3 messages. Thought we weren't going to do this.
Right.
And then another message. Why are we letting the raid dictate what we're doing right now? Things like that. You guys can pretend in your minds who said what. But ultimately, when we're like, all right, let's go to Carapace, we start clearing trash or whatever, and someone's like, but we only have like an hour left. Like, it wasn't me, but one of the other people who, by the way, every officer disagreed with me in that call, by the way. One of the other officers was like, because we're going to check phase 1 or whatever they had said, but they totally backed me up. And I would have done that for any other officer in that position, as any of them would have done for any other officer. You have to have that unity, even if you disagree. Then after raid, we sat in officer chat, and I got my shit pushed in by all the officers when they're like, don't fucking do that. And I was like, okay. And that's what you need. You have to have, at least outwardly, we're all working like fucking tight-knit group. And then you can discuss later the mistakes that you had. To have that argument in the middle of raid doesn't help anybody.
No.
So, well, here's a question that I would ask, because, because it happened and because it went that way, that was actually something that we were able to talk to as a group. We came together, and I think that, it's kind of consensus that we learned something from it. Do you guys think that it's fine for, in that guild management position, regardless of how big or small the mistake is? Do you guys feel like it's healthy or it's okay when you maybe make a mistake? Do you think that it has some redeemable parts to it? Anything like that? Because I think that, especially not as GM, even though I have a few, but when I was an officer and I was raid leading in Perdition, I definitely made a fuck ton of mistakes. But I felt like every time I made a mistake, I would always see it or realize it fairly quickly afterwards, and then it would be fixed. And then I would realize and see those trends and not make them later. So, what are your guys' hot takes on, I guess, mistakes? Because some people, they see it like a mistake or something doesn't go right, and they get really fucking mad about it, or they get really flustered.
Yeah.
But I think it's totally fine if it happens, as long as it's, something that, as a team or a group, or whoever it is, they can come together and fix it for potentially a later time.
So a mistake, in my opinion, is not something where dog shit on the floor, you smush his nose in it and say bad dog. To me, a mistake is, you guys familiar with Bob Ross? He doesn't make mistakes in his paintings, he makes happy accidents. Think of it that way, and it'll just, you'll become woke to that. I just said woke.
Please never say woke again.
Yeah, I'm never gonna say that again. You'll be better for it, because every mistake that you make is a learning opportunity. As long as you don't repeat it over and over and over, you can see the growth. I mean, you guys can see in our history the growth that the guild has gone. We started where we started, and we're, now we're here. It's so cliche to say that, like, started at the bottom, now we're here, like we are, like, beaten, Limit or the other guild in World Racers or anything. We're not, but considering we went from shit tier to not quite shit tier, I we made some mistakes along the way and we learned from it. We don't repeat them. That's important. Some mistakes you can repeat because in the context of the situation, it's going to be a little bit different. In the case of going to a boss with the last hour, slamming your dicks against the wall, some bosses, that's not going to work. Like N'Zoth, no, you're not going to go with 1 hour left and nobody having had strat talk and just be like, all right, let's go. I think it would be funny. Like, honestly, if we kill Carapace, we got an hour left, I want to just send the raid and be like, okay, guys, let's go. And then just set a pull timer and not explain anything and just see what happens. Because I think that'd be hilarious. But if you do that on a boss where it's like N'Zoth, you're not going to learn anything. Something like Carapace, where it's very clearly segmented phases and the first phase is so easy and you have to learn it anyways, you might as well use that hour. At the time, probably a bad call because we had decided we weren't going to do that. So it was a mistake, but in the context, not so bad. And you learn from it. You take that small mistake and you learn from that so that when you have a bigger thing come up, you think to yourself, wait, we said we weren't going to do this. I can't do this because, this is a significantly bigger issue than this other thing, which turned out okay. That might not happen here. You won't have that experience to draw back on if you never make mistakes. So mistakes are fucking awesome. Happy accidents.
Yeah, I can agree with that kind of sentiment. What do you think, Meeps?
Jay pretty much covered anything that I wanted to say on it other than happy accidents or woke. But the best.
What do you got against Bob Ross?
But the best way to learn is making mistakes. Like, you make a mistake, you learn from it, you move on, and man, if there's any reason that Sai is succeeding right now, it's because of all the mistakes we've made in the past and have learned from them.
I definitely agree with that. So, Meeps, I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
Oh boy.
Because I know that you've had some interesting time, especially from when you were, GM raid leading. Because when I came into Tomb initially, you were in that, more of a leadership position, and it was interesting to see how things went. But I guess that's just your style, so I'm not going to cram on your style or anything like that. As far as you being in a management position, what do you think is the biggest mistake you personally have ever made?
Putting myself in a management position. There's no question. I can do management position. Like, I have so much experience with it now, but I'm talking early on whenever Sai was first formed, and then whenever we took Sai back from Crown, and because the first formation I was GM, and that fell apart because I was GM. Largely, I mean, it was my decision that we merged into Crown. We could have practiced these things of have patience, just keep working on what you got. But I was inexperienced, and
on that note, I told you so.
Right, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. But then later, again, as a raid leader, which I think I could do an all right job now. But at the time, I was still formed. Most of my ideas came from whenever I was raiding with Pathogen on how to raid lead, and it was a much spicier way to raid lead than I think is really necessary. I mean, you guys were there. You can remember my raid leading style from Tomb.
Little ham-handed.
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm. I expected a lot more than I should have, especially out of a fledgling group with people that were new to raiding, especially. But that was my single biggest mistake, is putting myself in a leadership position without much experience.
Okay, that's fair. I think, from my perspective, one of the biggest mistakes that I have made, I have actually two different ones that I think each one can equally take the cake. The first one was when we were in Perdition, and when we left, it was a guild called Aftershock. We wanted to do Mythic, so we left and made Perdition, and we started to gather people. And we came up with a sick-ass roster, and then we went in, and it was literally the first day, I was just technically one of the founders. And I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to raid lead. I think I can do this. I got this. Putting myself in that position and not having done the research ahead of time or not, like, feeling comfortable with the group or not having like the ability to talk to people about it ahead of time, that was a very, very shitty place for me to be. Because like that first, I think it was like 2 weeks, we had gone through Chromatic Anomaly and then the one that was after Chromatic, the one where you eat all the cake. And I was fucking overwhelmed because Trilliax, that was it. I could not figure out, what to do. I was basically just looking at, videos of kills and trying to dissect it and going through, and most other people were putting out the information. And I think by the time that we finished doing Crosis, I had my kind of raid lead style down and I finally was getting there. But throwing myself into that position without practice or doing research or feeling like I was able to communicate with people ahead of time, that I think was one of my biggest mistakes. Another one that I think that is more relevant for recent is trying to please everyone in the guild. There were times where 4 or 5 people would have varying opinions on how something was going. So I would try to figure out the best healthy medium for every single one of them. But as we've already kind of touched, sometimes you kind of need to just go with what an officer corps or the heads of a guild think is the best way to move forward. And I didn't necessarily go ahead and do those things, or I didn't, support those ideas, or I didn't, follow like the packing order as far as like how we want the organization to work as far as like a raid lead or a recruiting officer goes, and the healing officer. I felt like I was interjecting too much, and now that I can step back and be a part of that team, I think it's a lot better instead of just trying to figure out everything on my own and rely on myself, and then making poor decisions because of that clouded judgment. I feel like that was also a very large mistake for me.
I feel like between the two of you, you just covered 50% of the, well, we'll say 49% of the majority of mistakes that most guildmasters make or raid leaders. I'm going to cover the other 49%. And I
by yourself?
Yeah, because there's 2% gap there that we're not covering right now. But between your guys' points and what I'm about to say, I'm pretty sure we cover the vast majority of guilds. For me, it was taking too much on myself. I was totally prepared to be GM. I was totally prepared to raid lead. I was totally prepared to recruit. I was totally prepared to try and set up sales. I was totally prepared to do all of that.
At the same time?
I was not totally prepared to do it all at the same time. That was the issue. So, specifically around the Crown era or, shortly after that or whatever, I made the decision that I have a little bit of an issue with, I have OCD, so relinquishing control on anything is a little bit tough for me. I'm doing much better now, but it is something that is very apparent if you know me at all. I'm the kind of guy that likes to have my hand in all the pots. I like to have all the, know what's going on around me. I'm in real life, like I know what's going on around me. I'm the kind of guy that puts my back to the wall so I can see everybody in the room. Even if I'm not just people watching, but I just be aware of everything that's going on around me. Something about me that is like that. When I take that approach to raiding, it can be great. Your highs are real high, but your lows are the lowest you can think of. Probably lower than most people can think of, especially over a video game. Because you'll get into a position like I was in where, I was guild lead, I was raid lead, and I had a couple officers that they didn't do anything. One of which, totally fine. I knew Drew wasn't going to do anything, but Sai has always been the 3 of us. And I was like, dude, what do you want to do for like officer job? And he's like, I don't want to recruit. And I'm like, okay, well, do you want to raid lead? Nope. You want to be GM? Nope. All right, we'll figure out something. And then we never did.
Right.
The recruitment officer that I brought in at the time. Yeah, right. The recruitment officer that I brought in at the time didn't really want to do it or wasn't available to do it or whatever, like just didn't do it. So I was bringing in 4, 5 trials a week, and I'm not exaggerating. Like every week there would be 4 or 5 new people in the raid, but unfortunately we'd be losing 4 or 5 people every week. And the thing was, the trials would stick around for 2 or 3 weeks, but we'd be losing the trials from 6 weeks ago today, and then next week we'd have more trials, and 5 weeks from now we would lose the ones that I got today. So it was like this revolving door. And I totally brought that on myself because I was just like, I was not able to stand up to the other officers and be like, look, guys, you guys aren't doing anything. Fucking do something. Like, help me out here. And it got to a point where I nearly fucking like broke down one night, and I was like, you guys, like, what the fuck is going on? And that's ultimately when we stopped raiding in Legion for like 2 months or whatever, when I was like, I'm done. I can't. I'm out. And I think we ended up finding a merger shortly after that. But yeah, that was probably the thing for me that was the biggest mistake, is just taking too much on myself and probably not having the right people around me. Right now, we got the right people around us. The 2 other officers aside from us 2, or us 3, I can't count apparently. They 2 plus 1 is 7. Everybody knows it. We all have differing opinions, like we talked about, but we all do stuff. None of us recruited, aside from Nick, none of us recruited at all in the last 3 months. That was all Nick.
Yep.
We would get the odd person that would apply, or they'd add me on BTAG or on Disc, and I'd, if they added me on Discord, I'd be like, cool, add person to DM, scroll, hey, there's Nick, add, here's a recruitment officer, talk to him. That's all I'd do. I would not talk to them at all. I would always pawn them off on him, and he just would go and start churning in recruits. So the fact that we all do stuff now is fantastic. Biggest mistake is trying to do it all.
That's fair. I actually have a little side tangent as far as mistakes go, because I think it's funny also to, as far as like in a raider position, not as necessarily like a management position, it's funny to see the mistakes that others make. We could always talk about, the Crown situation with that GM and how we thought he made bad mistakes, or I could always talk about Slice, who is the GM of position, who I thought was making bad mistakes. But it's also funny to see how like the raiders themselves, not just management, also make mistakes. I was in Resistance for a while on Hydrol, and I had Otter, who is our tank right now, with me, and he was in a position where he was trying to fight for that raid spot, and he, in my opinion, as far as wanting to be with them and wanting to progress more with them, made a bad decision of keeping a piece of gear that most certainly would have kept him competitive instead of giving it to someone else, which was kind of the way that they wanted to do the heroic farm that we were doing. So a trinket dropped, he was told to give it up, and he wanted to keep it. He ended up leaving because they wanted to, permanently sit him, or even they wanted to kick him out of the guild for that kind of thing. Which I thought was a huge mistake on his part, because the 2 of us were really in it together. And it was just, something that he had done is the kind of selfish way that some people do. But that was, as far as what they had said, was made a mistake. I think that it could have been handled a lot better. He could have talked to him about it. He could have made, a point. He could have just gave it to him and bonus rolled it, or gotten it, a different week. Because he was definitely able and capable to get that raid spot. But that ended up just completely relinquishing from any raid position there. So I think it's also funny to note that, like, it's not just necessarily like the management that might make a mistake and that affects the raid team. It also is sometimes the other people that are involved, the raiders, that make a mistake. And if they make a mistake, sometimes tensions can get a little high. Like if someone makes a mistake and someone else calls them out, that can get really, really awkward, and that can put people on tilt for raid prog. Someone can make a bad decision, get kicked out of a guild or leave a guild, and that can affect, the roster size, because we didn't raid Mythic that next week because we had too many post outs and we were at 19 and Otter wasn't there to do Mythic Queen's Court. So, shit happens. I think it's funny to see that it's in a guild, everyone is together. It's not just a management perspective where accidents may sometimes occur.
Right.
I think the one thing that you're not thinking of, though, in that specific example, unless you left out some key details, I would put that purely on the management.
Oh, well,
I wouldn't say that's a mistake on Otter at all. I think that's a management thing, because here's the thing. If you want to have a guild where you funnel gear to the specific people that you want, and then after that we can gear everybody else, that has to be outright said. And either you play on Master Looter, which is no longer a thing. So if that's not the case, then you put it right on Front Street. Hey, everybody in the guild, this is the deal. If you're able to trade a piece of gear, you're going to give it to this tank first, if you're in their armor class. If not, you're going to give it to this person, then this healer, or whatever. If you don't have that outright, I think it's incredibly unfair to ask anybody to trade anything. That being
Yeah.
said, you can ask them. You
Yeah.
can't get mad when they say no.
So on one hand, yes, I do agree that I think that them having that planned out was a mistake, because that's not fair, or that's not, nice to anyone to get a piece of gear and being told to give it to someone else when, they could also use it, or it's not necessarily needed for that other person, that kind of thing. But the thing was that they did have it ironed out ahead of time. So at least it wasn't just, hey, I see you got this thing, can you give it to this person? It was already kind of predetermined. So,
Okay.
again, it goes both ways. Whereas I think it was a mistake for the management position to say, hey, this is the system we want to put in place, because that doesn't seem conducive to a healthy raid environment, which is,
Right.
I would not want to make that decision in any call. But then it also goes back to the people where they were told this thing and they necessarily didn't want to follow through with it. So I think both parties are somewhat guilty, but the takeaway that I would, focus on most is that it affected the raid as a whole, because we didn't have grips making a certain other fight easier for Orgzoa. We were down a raid member, so we had to call raid for a week while we were waiting for people to get back on. And it was all because of, some really petty, stupid thing. So, both parties could be at fault, but, take it as you will and think about it from which perspective as you want, I guess.
Well, with that extra information of them knowing outright that that's the way that the raid's going to be run, then it totally is Otter's fault. Like, that is an important key piece of information there that you kind of left out initially.
He agreed to this.
If you're in a guild where that is the way that loot is going to be handled, even on a personal loot, group loot, whatever the situation is, type loot system, you have to conform to that. If you're not willing to, bye Felicia.
True story. Have you guys ever had any experience like that? Like people doing unusual or questionable stuff? Regardless of if you're management or not.
I had a dude in Ninja Loot.
That was a lot more back in the old days, though, right? Or was that like an officer Ninja looted?
That was in Karazhan.
Okay.
And it was an officer.
Oh, that even makes it so much worse.
And main tank.
Fuck's sake.
Officer, main tank, Karazhan, looted off of, not Malkazar, the boss before that, maybe Chess, where the badass shield drops at the time. I can't remember.
That would be Chess. I remember because I went to go farm the Mog.
Yeah, Chess shield. He was like, it finally dropped, because it hadn't dropped, and, we were on Master Loot, and he's just like, cool, taking it. And we're like, whoa, you're already like super geared. The off tank kind of needs it. Can we at least talk about it? Nope. And we're like, that's not cool. Okay.
For me, there's nothing that really sticks out. Most of the mistakes that I think of are my own, or most of the things that stick with me are my own. But most of the mistakes that I notice are during an encounter, especially positioning mistakes, especially whenever I'm on a class I'm really familiar with, so I just spend my time with my mind turned off, like pushing buttons automatically and watching what everyone else does so that I can, yell at them to get to the right spot. You guys,
I like that's a priority.
You guys definitely saw a lot of that whenever we were doing Tomb, as whenever I was really on top of it because I was playing Marksman Hunter. And I could just turn my brain off with what I was doing and watch Rise.
I still hate that fight. Fuck Maiden of Vigilance. That fight will haunt me forever.
I actually really like the Maiden fight and the Kill Jaden fight. I think those two were probably my highlights of that whole raid tier. I think it was fantastic.
I can't go back to Kill Jaden now because I don't have Windrush or not. I don't have Gust of Wind anymore. I can't cheat and parse
I should specify it's the mythic only part that I actually specifically really like. The fact that you can't see anything and you've got these lasers bouncing you around and you have to go in a specific order. I just love that chaos. I love it. More chaos. That being said, fuck Phase 2 Carapace.
Yeah, especially that right side. It's pretty fucking rough.
Cappy knows what I'm talking about.
Don't even get me started on Shadow
Phase
Priests 2. On Phase 2 Carapace. You mother...
Yeah.
Look,
That
we're going to
shit's
cheat to
clear
get
out.
our damage. I'm sorry. If you want to stand there, and we'll take the mind bomb. We're going to get out of the way. But that is just, oh, fuck that fight. Fuck that fight. I move at 20% movement speed. I got to get to the melee. Oh, it's dead now? Okay, I'll go to the next one.
Alright, before we get too far off topic,
I agree.
Jay,
Yeah.
was there any mistake that you've noticed in particular that someone's made?
Other than ninja looting.
Well, one time back in the day, we had our main tank double jump glide away from the bridge on Croesus. Though I think that was intentional.
Right.
So
If
I
it's
don't know if that's a
intentional, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
and
Like,
it
I think intention kind of is that line, right?
and it partially led to the reformation of Psi, so
Sorry, Steven. He's like, stop, don't remind me. Yeah, he remembers that well. That was a good night. Let's see. I mean, I can think of 1,000 mistakes I've made. It's really hard to narrow down a mistake that somebody else made unless it's super memorable. I got a great dungeon one that involves Otter, mostly
Just gonna
because it's
bring it
still
up.
a clip on my channel,
turkey.
but it I'm not gonna
No,
he
do
knows
it.
what he did. But as far as raid goes, generally, unless it's something super egregiously bad, I don't notice it. I'll notice it in the moment. I'll notice it in the moment, and we'll just deal with it then, and then I'll move on. I try not to carry it.
wait, are you talking about what do you know what cleave means? Or are you talking about another?
No,
Okay.
no, there was another one, but same dungeon.
Same
That's the
person,
one that I
same
was gonna
dungeon.
bring up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna CC this diamond. Yeah, got it. DK. Whoopsh. Why?
Reasons, Jay. Reasons.
I thought he was gonna.
It
have
wasn't
heart
even a
attack.
DPS increase. He walked over to hit it. He could have like hit it with a fucking dot from like 20 yards away. He's a DK. He could have like blood plagued it or something like for a DPS increase. I don't know, man. It was that ad's got to die. Fuck that. It's in a cyclone or rooted or whatever I did to it. Doesn't matter. Anyway.
Well, all right, then to flip it from a negative of mistakes, how about a positive? What do you guys think?
Air.
Huh? What?
Air on Raw Den Prog. Save the raid. Lightning was being shot back and forth. He wasn't on an assignment to grab the ball, and it was about to hit the ground, and he just goes double jump glide, knocks it back to the melee, gets right back in. Laser beam hits immediately after that. It was like a baby on the tracks as a train is coming, and he's like, everybody else is just standing around. I guess I'll do it. And he just hopped in, grabbed the baby, hopped out of the tracks just as it came by and like nicked a little bit of his shirt. And it's like, woo. And yeah, we ended up getting the kill, I think, on that pole or like 2 poles later.
That wasn't where I was going with it, but I like the positivity.
You said positivity. That's all I thought of.
Oh,
Sorry,
I was
I'll let you continue.
gonna go with more of, regardless of how large or small the impact was, what was something that you're proud of as part of a guild management that you've done?
This isn't like a specific scenario, but something that I personally felt really proud of that like really got me more into the harder core stages of WoW. When I ended up taking that raid lead position in Perdition, the people there, none of them had ever stepped into Mythic, including myself, so I didn't know what I was getting into. None of them knew what they were getting into. But we ended the tier, I want to say it was 10 out of 11 was I think it was 11 was up to Gul'dan. But we had just finished Grand Magi Elson, and like it was like the next week it was like, okay, well Tomb's coming out, so progression's done. And I was just sitting there just thinking like, I jumped into this position and helped raid lead a bunch of people through a bunch of bullshit fights and really hard prog. None of us had experience in, and then we ended up getting all the way to the pinnacle boss of a cutting edge raid tier. That was really fucking hard and really long as well. It wasn't something easy as well. So that's something that I'm personally proud of, at least in current iteration of Psi. It's really hard to say. I guess the one thing that I am most proud of is all the other guilds that I've ever been to when I was on Area 52 or when I came back to Hyjal when I was in Resistance. None of those places ever felt accommodating, or it never felt like it was a group of people that were there to be friends and hang out. It was just, let's make a mythic raid team, and we're toxic and most of us don't care for each other at all, and we're just there to kill bosses. So I'm really proud of the fact that, primarily off of other people, that this in particular raid tier, we've been able to have a group of people that want to do things outside of raid, that want to hang out together, that seem friendly and making bonds instead of just making a raid team. That's something that I'm more happy with.
I was actually going to answer with exactly that. I think for me, my probably proudest achievement, air quotes, in WoW is the current iteration of Psy. The fact that we set out to build a raid team for Shadowlands, and we are now 10 out of 12 with was it 18%, 12%? Something wipe on Carapace with presumably a couple of weeks left yet, is... like, honestly, when we had started, we're like, okay, Shadowlands is coming out. Like, right now we have like 15, 16. Like, let's build and see what we can do. Build a core for Shadowlands. We'll tell everybody, like, hey, we're building for Shadowlands. If we don't get in Mythic right away, it's totally fine. All that spiel that everybody's heard before. And now we're 10 of 12 within spitting distance of Cutting Edge, when we started so much later than everybody else. And now we're here, coupled with the fact that genuinely everybody in the guild seems to at least like everybody else. There's nobody in the guild that I can think of that is like, well, Meeps will be like, hey, anybody want to do a Mythic Plus? And then me being like, oh yeah, Rise just said he was going to do a Mythic Plus, you should message him. And I go, him? No, I'm not going to go with him. Like, we don't have anybody in the guild right now that just won't play with another person outside of raid. Like, generally everybody pretty much plays with each other. You got your little cliques or whatever, a small group of friends that will have a spot and bring in somebody every now and then, but generally everybody's very happy, shooting the shit during raid. Discord is it's popping daily. The food porn chat, probably the most popular chat in our entire Discord channel, as everybody posts every meal that they eat ever. And I'm hungry on a minute-by-minute basis. Every time something pops up in that chat, I got to check it out and immediately get hungry again. But that's my answer, is current Psy.
That's my proudest moment, is making the food porn channel. I
thought I made that when I still had permissions in Discord.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, don't steal my thunder.
Well,
I've got nothing to be proud about.
Him the ability to make the food porn channel.
Right. I've got nothing then.
Oh, come on. There has to be something. Yeah. Yeah, what about when you were in other guilds, not just Psy?
Oh.
What about getting those tier 1, those top world challenge modes?
Well,
dungeons back in Mists.
We were talking from a guild management perspective.
All right.
And talking from a guild management perspective, all I've done is fail downward to where now I'm an officer without a job, but I'm still an officer. And we can't decide what job to give me. When we think about it, we're like, yeah, he's HR. Like, he'll deal with the people, I guess. Anyone gets out of line,
somebody has an issue,
we'll sick Meeps on them.
Meeps, they're like, I don't want to. Then you don't have an issue, do you? Well, I guess not.
That's so perfect.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, well, then, I suppose from that perspective is finding the correct people for the officer jobs. Or maybe not finding is the word, but like us shaking it out to where we're at now.
I'd point out what Nick had brought up actually from the chat of Twitch. You technically came up with the idea of Psy. So, even though technically right now you don't have like a super ironed out job or like a specific title other than just being an officer and one of the people that we, talk to about strategies and stuff like that, you did kind of fund and build this idea. So I would say that like you could just cop out and say like the whole idea of Psy and like what we wanted and the fact that we've worked towards what you wanted I'd say that is probably one of your more successful things, if you want to consider that.
I like that. Let's cop out.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, because the impetus. I was the impetus. It just happened to be at a good time with people coming back at the end of a raid tier in Legion. I saw a whole bunch of my friends coming back. I knew their experience. I knew they were good raiders. And then I'd also just met, Jay, your group, and I'd experienced, like, you had, what, like,
I need your consent on a few items to
you
continue.
Shut up. And it's funny, we, like, pulled, what was, like, 6 or 7 people out of your guild at the time. You had, like, 4 or 5 other people, but we only ended up pulling, like, the good core.
Yep.
So yeah, all right, I'll take that. None of us would be here if it weren't for me.
Fair enough.
Very, very humble opinion. And, yeah, I agree. No, but in all seriousness, like, if I hadn't seen, does anybody want to make a guild, in a BattleNet message as his status, then I wouldn't have ever messaged him and been like, I mean, I already have one, but yeah.
Sure, why not?
He's like, all right, here's a Discord server. Come join us. And I joined, and it was, Trek, Panda, Meeps, and I hopped in. I was like, what's up, guys? And, the rest is obviously history. But if it wasn't for that BattleNet message, now it's just something about using a rocket launcher as a shotgun or something.
I love that. I have no excuse. I use the rocket launcher like a shotgun.
Okay, so so now I have a question kind of based on that story. So, you guys just kind of randomly came together in that regard as 2 good players wanting to build a guild. So, in past experiences, because again, I've joined a couple guilds, you guys have been a part of many different guilds, and now we're all a part of Psy. But like, when you're looking at a guild, or when you're looking at the proposition for like a merger, or to join a guild, or to go hang out with some people, like, what are the things that you're looking for? Obviously, Meeps, I bet one day it was just, are these people really good? Do they not have shitters? Are these people really friendly? That kind of stuff. Like, what do you guys actually? What's the criteria you guys think about when you're like apping to a guild, or when you're like looking to do stuff with people?
I want to take this one first.
Sure.
So that has evolved over time, and if you're asking that question for me right now, I'm not looking. I've got Psy. I've had Psy. Whenever I didn't have Psy, I wouldn't really look for a guild. I'd just glom onto a raid group because I want to raid. Usually a heroic group, because I never wanted to really put both my feet into another guild. I mean, obviously, I was with Wing It for a little bit, just because I was really chomping at the bit for progression, and they were the only guild that fit my schedule. But throughout the history of WoW, I can tell you it's just changed with what I wanted, what I learned from the game, and what I wanted from the game. In the beginning, Psy isn't the first guild I formed; it's the second guild I formed. Way back in Wrath, I formed with 4 other people a guild called Bovinity, because I thought it was hilarious. Divine Bovine, Bovinity. So
that's pretty good. Were you all Torns?
No, I wasn't. I was a troll. We had 2 Torn, I think.
Wow.
But we were all completely new. It was 5 people we met doing a Maraudon. This was before looking for group. Like, I just put out into the area. I was like, I need people for this group, and so we ended up with a Fury Warrior to tank, 2 other Hunters to DPS, and a Holy Paladin to heal. We did Marathon, and then that, like, we all had fun. We enjoyed each other's company, and we formed a guild because we were all guildless, because that's what the game was back then for us new players. But then from there, like, my cousin was a big part of why I came back. He hadn't stopped since I gave him my account in vanilla. So whenever I finally got to level cap and started to actually play in game, he'd been playing, I think it was Nax at the time, and he was playing a rogue, and he'd done the raid a couple times. Good work, Jay. So he became the raid leader for a completely noob guild because he'd done the raid a couple times. He had no idea how to raid lead. It was just a complete mess. I can still remember my first time stepping into 25 Naxxramas. We wiped on Mayexna with 32 health left. Like,
Oh,
right? But anyway, I'm way off topic. So that I'm setting the stage of like over time, what I've looked for in a guild has evolved. Back then, it went pretty well for a new guild, and that's what I wanted. And then I got a taste of raiding, and that's what I wanted. So I started looking for raiding guilds that were clearing the content. I wasn't very confident in my ability, so I looked for any raiding guild that was clearing 10-man. Not even hard modes, like whenever Old War came out. I wasn't looking for the guild that was like putting up server firsts. I just wanted to get through it. And later on, my next step up was to get into the more hardcore raiding, and it's always been raiding focused until Psy. And it was Pathogen that turned me off of being raiding focused. Because yes, we did really well in the tier, but as you guys have alluded to with toxic guilds, it was the most toxic raid focused guild. There were a couple friends, like I'd say a couple cliques of 3 to 4 people, and then like the cliques of 3 to 4 people didn't get along with the other cliques of 3 to 4 people, or the people that didn't make any friends. So
I imagine it's pretty hard to hold on to a long-term raider when you're in a guild like that too, because as things get more toxic, eventually you just come to the point where you're like, all right, putting up with this shit is not worth getting, world 50th or world 15th or, whatever, right?
But at the same time, if you've got that high rank, then you've got everyone apping to your guild, so you can just keep picking the best talent out to replace the people that leave.
Yeah.
But that's whenever it turned to what I'm at now, is I want a community-centric, high-end raiding guild. Maybe high-end is the wrong word, but definitely mythic raiding as a focus, but also community-driven.
Yeah.
that's fair.
I think for once my answer will be shorter than Meeps's. That wasn't a diss on how long you spoke, but rather how quickly this answer is going to be. I mean, I'm speaking now just to fill out more time. Otherwise, it's not going to be like me answering. I'll steal a little bit of what Meep said currently. Not looking. I'm happy where I am. I'm honestly, like I said in the previous answer, most proudest moment is where we are right now. So obviously, I think that's going to be said for all three of us, but fuck it, I'll throw it out there too. If I was looking for a guild, in the past, what I've always looked for is prog. Just more prog, all the prog. Starting from when I first stepped into LBRS of my very first character in, vanilla, and I was like, oh shit. And I just happened to be in a group with like 8 people from End Result, and I did more damage than almost everybody. And they were like, oh, hey, you want to join our guild? And literally joined the second best guild on the server. Like that. My first, raid back in the day. That was before Nixia, before Molten Claw, all that. So, yeah, I mean, from that point onwards, I literally started second best guild on the server, fighting for server first, and I never got rid of that bug. So wherever I went, it was always, if my guild died or times didn't match up anymore, I got a different job or school schedule changes, I would, check on the server like, okay, who's in the top 3? How are their times? What's the progression like? Are they spending a lot more time on XYZ boss versus this boss? What was their prog last tier? What was their prog 2 tiers ago? All of that's relevant. Now, are they clearing Mythic before, the tier's over? Like the day before? Yes? Okay, still fits my criteria. That's all I care about. Second thing, are they toxic? If yes, I'm out. I did the toxic once. Clubhouse was a hilarious guild. I loved all of my time there, except for all of my time there.
Oh.
They were hilarious and awesome players, but it was pretty fucking toxic. It was you'd have those nights where you're just like, wow, I heard some shit tonight.
I'm gonna be scarred for the next 3 years.
I think there is one good thing that came from Clubhouse, though. the fact that they release memes continuously that are just fucking hilarious related to tier. I've seen those on YouTube. Those are amazing. That's the one good thing that I know about Clubhouse.
Oh, they still got the memes, and I mean, I wouldn't still have the GM, one of their top healers, and a couple other players that I met there on my friends list and talked to, semi regularly, if they weren't all awesome people. It was just there was a little bit of toxicity there that I just wasn't willing. Like, for example, as soon as they knew that I like to stream the raid, like my first night in there, they're like, "Oh, is somebody streaming?" Like, yeah, I am. Like, oh shit, okay. N-word. Like, cool. Now I'm muting audio for stream for eternity. And the second I turn off stream, everything would be totally fine. And then I'd be like, all right, I'm going to turn on the stream. Like 5 minutes later, it's like, hey guys, Jay turned on his stream. N-word. And they wouldn't do that unless the stream was on. So I knew they were doing it just to fuck with me, which partly is funny. Other part is like, really, come on.
The funny part is that they gave you viewers.
They got me affiliated.
Yeah.
We were doing Goldan, and we could only have 20 in, obviously, and some of the people didn't want to go, but they're like, I want to watch it. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'm streaming. They're like, all right, cool. And then I had like 10 viewers or whatever, and the last milestone that I needed for affiliate was concurrent 25 viewers at one time. So I was like, hey, everybody in the raid, go open the stream real quick. And they're like, why? And then they all did. Achievement popped. Congratulations. And I was like, hey. Then I applied for affiliate that night, got the email the next day, and I was like, money.
Nice.
So, I mean, it worked out. It had its upsides, but I don't want to raid an environment. Like, I like our environment right now. We can be toxic every now and then. People can have a bad day and be a dick to other people, but generally, the environment in our guild is everybody's there to have fun. They might have fun by poking fun at somebody else, but everybody's going to give and take it in equal share unless your name is Nate, in which case then you're going to take the mountain share of it and probably not say anything back. Sorry, bud. We love you. Rest in peace, Nate.
I miss him.
Me too. Come back. But yeah, that would be the second most important. Number one would have been Prague.
For me, when I was looking around, definitely at the time it was Prague. Obviously, don't need to be a dead horse. Now, I am not currently looking for a guild. You guys can relax. You guys can breathe. But one of the things that I adapted later, primarily the very first guild that I joined, I don't even remember their fucking name, to be honest with you, on Area 52 at the start of Antorus, and then eventually we got back together. I joined this guild on Antorus, and we were like 6 out of 12 mythic, and then we wanted to get back together. I was like, okay, see you guys, and I left. But the one thing that really pissed me off about that guild is that none of them were inviting whatsoever. And I mean, I had the third highest IO in the group. I was probably top 3 on damage playing a class that was not a meta class, an elemental shaman, and then eventually went resto for them so they could get the Iminar kill that they were really trying for going battle shaman. But it was like every single time I was like, does anyone have any keys? And it would pop up for everyone in the guild had astral keys, and they just wouldn't, no one would talk, no one would do anything. It was just 3 or 4 groups of clicky people that only private messaged each other. It was literally raid, and then it was our little group of 3 that does our own stuff, and we're not going to let anyone else in. And that was really demoralizing to join a group and be like, all right, I'm used to Psy, we're all friends here, we're all hanging out, and then it's just exclusivity everywhere. Being like, okay, that's not cool. When I went to Resistance, it was a little bit better for a time, but then eventually it got to the point where it was very obvious that it was, clicky. And then with problems with management that I won't necessarily go into, I ended up leaving them. We came back here and we started this up again. But yeah, it's one of the things that I've adapted, and I think is a more important thing for me now is I do want the Prague, but I rather have a friendly environment where people are actually wanting to do stuff with each other. Kind of like the idea of a super guild. You want to log into a guild and have there be 5-6 people to go and do a key with, to go and queue RBGs with, or to go and find a pug heroic raid because you're looking for an old trinket or something. And since none of those other guilds had it, that was something that was really disappointing. So I'd say now my new focus is still, I want to get Prague, I want to get CE to make sure that I have it for every tier. But more importantly, if I get into a guild and I try to reach out or I try to do something, especially if I'm on the upper end, like if I'm the worst person there, I understand that people are going to be exclusive at first. But when you pump a little bit, you make a name for yourself, or you do some really good stuff in raid, if people are still exclusive, or people don't want to talk to you, or people are just don't seem like a good group of people, I don't want to be there. I don't think anyone else should be there, because at the end of the day, you're choosing to be on the game. If you don't want to be there, or if it feels weird to be there, you should go find another place. Obviously, patience and give it a little bit of time to maybe earn a little bit of trust, or to feel a little bit more comfortable. But that's definitely my priority now when I look at a guild. Is just I want it to be not a shit show. I don't want it to be toxic. I want it to be a happy environment where people can go hang out and do stuff together, instead of it just being a raiding guild, because that has never been that appealing past my experiences.
And this kind of just brings us back full circle to that question from earlier about what's the most important thing in guild management. Unity. No, but seriously, all three of us kind of gave our own variations of literally the same thing. Used to be rating first, now it's community first. As long as we get CE by the end of the tier, we're rating with our friends. We just want the people around us to not be a bag of dicks and just have a good time. When it boils it down, that's all of our answer, and it's like,
okay, so weird lead off of that. So now that we're on the other side of the wall and we have people coming to us, have you guys ever tried to make it more suitable for other people? Because as a GM perspective, I'm always thinking about how can I make this place better for other people to be here. And I can even think of old members. A couple weeks ago, I went and played some Call of Duty Battlegrounds with Zolden. If you guys remember Zolden from Old Deer. A couple months ago played with Kurdabi. We went and played some Apex Legends because they're still a part of the gang and I still want to hang out with them. But I think that's an important thing to think about is, we're also in that same boat as we've had those experiences where we want to make a fun raiding environment where people are friendly. So have you guys felt like you've done anything specific to mold that or kind of shape that idea, or have just kind of just done what you do and people just kind of see it that way?
Okay, so I'll quickly take this. Firstly, there's stuff. I promise I'll be quick this time. There's stuff that you want to do, and there's stuff that you need to do, and then there's stuff that you're just absolutely not willing to do. One of the things I want to do is I want to make sure that our guild is inclusive to anybody who wants to be a member of the guild. If you just want to join and shoot the shit with us and talk to us on a daily basis, be in the Discord channels, share the memes, the NSFW chat, the food porn chat, which is way more food and absolutely no porn. I'm gonna start sharing some stuff. If you want to be part of all that and not raid, that's totally fine. If you want to be just a Mythic Plus player and you don't want to raid at all, but you want to, still be part of that environment and maybe also have a Mythic Plus team, built with maybe a couple of the raiders, shared same space to be in, absolutely. The more the better. I'm totally down with even more casual members. I'd love to have more people just on and just in guild chat, even if they never play with us, just like Overman, who's always there, just hanging around, and you can be like, hey man, how's your day today? And he goes, that was good. How's yours? Like, oh, not bad. And if that's the only thing you say, I'm like, fine, whatever. But, people to talk to, community, that's important. Things I'm not willing to do, I absolutely hate PvP. I'm not gonna fucking put together a guild PvP thing. Even if it's to farm honor for a stupid essence, I'm just not gonna fucking do it. Don't fucking ask. I don't care about your inclusivity. Fuck off.
Fair.
As far as kind of answering more completely, no, that's about it. That's all I got. See, he was quick, kind of.
Kind of. It was quick for you.
Yeah.
I think that's important
for me. Yeah.
Personally, I've tried it's never worked out long term, but I've always tried to get more people in, but we are primarily focused on the Mythic raid. Like, we want the people that are going to be Mythic raiding with us, and it's nice to have someone like Overman, or if we recruit someone that ends up raiding with us and then their friends want to just come hang out in the guild, they're more than welcome to, and we encourage that. But trying to get even more people on that don't really have a focus on raiding, like what purpose do they have to join the guild other than people to talk to, unless there's some other activity that we do? consistently. Like if say Thursdays we decided that it'd be key day, and so people that want to do keys show up on Thursdays. Well, maybe we have more people that only want to do keys join the guild, but we don't, and that's fine. And we've had a couple mini mergers, I guess you could say. One notable that eventually they split back off, but they never really completely fit in with everyone. We do things together, especially a second raid, like the heroic raid. We'd have people from the mythic raid, and then we'd have the other people that didn't mythic raid doing this raid, and it worked out all right. But yeah, it's something that I've tried to work on and off, is to grow the guild in a non-raid capacity. But it's something that I've never really discovered the best way to do it, or been very successful in doing so.
I think that's a very complicated thing, though, because unless you have a specific direction that you want to go in, it's very hard to know like what you want. With that group in particular, I mean, I never got an indication from them what they wanted to do aside from casually raid one night a week. So when they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna split off and do our own thing," I think I even said it. I was like, "Well, why?" Like, I mean, you do you, and all the power to you, and all that, fucking bullshit. But at the end of the day, it's like, but do you just want a different guild tag above your head? Like, I don't, like, what's the purpose? You basically have complete autonomy and everything. And I don't know. It's one of those things that's just kind of like, what's the end goal,
Right.
And that is part of that tricky process of trying to figure out what it is that you can do to include more people that don't necessarily have that shared focus, which I think that is kind of where things that you've done in the past, as far as like lottery or an achievement hunt or
easy doing the scavenger hunt.
Oh, the scavenger hunt.
Scavenger hunt, yeah. That was really cool. I wish at the time when he did it, I wasn't playing very much, and I couldn't. I think I had just gotten into like D&D super heavy, so I was playing D&D 5 nights a week. So like I just literally couldn't participate. But if that happened nowadays, I'd be like, fuck, I'm in. Like, because it's just so much fun to just, fly around and see things that maybe you don't normally think of because it's not on the way to the raid, so you never see it. Like,
or it's not in the current expansion.
Exactly. Or just fun little things to do outside of raid. And you've done those before, some successfully, some less successfully. Guild lottery is something that I thought was fantastic, and personally I think we should just do it because it is great for repairs, and especially building up for Shadowlands. We're going to need a large stock of cash to fund our alchemists.
Oh yeah.
The only problem with the lottery
and
was
scribes.
It just ended up being me funding the guild bank. Like,
yeah,
on some weeks we'd have a lot of interest in the lottery, but then we'd have these recessions of like 10, 12 weeks where I'm like, I have to constantly up the pot. Someone has to put into the pot or else it doesn't grow. So that was the unfortunate part. If we had consistent people playing lottery, I would have kept it going.
I don't think it needs to actually have a pot to start with. I think it should just one person. Well, you can't obviously have less than 2 people in it. But for example, if 2 people put in 10K, and easy numbers, 2 people put in 10K, you roll the lottery, winner gets 15K. It's 5K profit for that person. 5K goes to the guild bank. No big deal. Obviously, if you want to start the pot at 50K to entice more people to come in, then that's one thing. But if it's 10K and 20 people join, that's 200K pot. So maybe the winner gets 180K from their 10K. Like, maybe it depends on how you sell it to the guild, but kind of off topic here.
Right.
Ultimately, what I'm saying, though, is with those extra people, you do kind of want to make sure that you have a focus for them, unless they are like somebody like Overman who just wants a place to hang out and talk while he's doing
his
whatever he does.
114th alt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude's got like 4 accounts of like maxed characters and like maxed out all of his character slots or whatever. It's like, I don't know what he does or what he gets fun out of the game, but whatever he's doing, if he wants to do that here, cool. It's an extra person to say hey to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're happy to have all the Overmans.
Oh yeah.
All
Bring me more
I think
Overman.
I think it counted a couple days ago. I think it was like 53 Overman accounts that like all of them are just tagged Overman.
Oh, characters in the guild, yeah.
Yeah. It's like
That's
it's looking
insane.
through like, who's this person? Oh, it's Overman. Who's this person? Oh, that's a Raider ult. That's interesting. I hadn't seen one. Oh, who's this one? Overman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've pretty much exhausted the guild management, so we'll finish off with the raid management part because I think there's a lot less to talk about, and some of the things we've already covered. So the first thing about raid management is prog versus farm. Like, how do you approach the two?
Well, so one thing that I want to bring up really quick, because a lot of people, and myself included, have, like, say, for example, we're going and we're doing our first set of Vexiona pulls, and we kill Vexiona. Next week, when we get back to Vexiona, it's really hard to consider that a farm boss. Because, yeah, we got to kill.
not.
Yeah, we got to kill. So technically, we're ready to continuously kill it, hopefully, and farm it up. But sometimes it can be a fluke. Sometimes a boss can be much harder. So I guess the first thing I would put out there is like a farm boss is something that we have killed with significant amount of time, like reclearing. I would say probably 3 or 4 reclears at that point when I really consider it farm. That also gets into sketchy territory because I would consider something like Zanesh. Zanesh is farm now to us. But there have been quite a few times where even when we get to Zanesh, we fuck up colossally on that boss. But I guess that is also true for a lot of different guilds. Yeah, we've progged on Zanesh probably like 10 times if you want to be, serious about it. But as far as like choosing farm or prog, it's really hard, and I tend to base it, at least my own opinion, is like 1, if we've killed it X amount of times, and also 2, if the raid like needs it. Because I know at some point, like recently we locked out on Carapace, and I think that is a very good move that we did. But looking at every single raider, it's like, well, 6, 7 more people could use the raw den trinket, so why don't we go kill it? Some people could use the weapon off of Drestagath. Some people could use that Azurite piece off of Il'gynoth. But at the end of the day, when you're thinking about a priority, we already have the capability of killing the boss once we learn it, because all the other fights up until then were just easier to learn. They weren't as hard of gear checks. So as far as like setting up a raid now, specifically just talking about farm versus prog, prog is the bosses that you struggle with that are newer to kill, that are going to be your next big goal, or like require a gear/mechanics check that's pretty significant. Farm at that point, if you've killed enough times, and usually when it doesn't matter as much or when it has a very low priority, that's when it's at farm. I don't know if you guys agree with that kind of definition. And I probably have a topic too.
I define a fight prog until it's killed 3 times. Once it's killed 3 times, it's on farm. Now, yeah, we've been progging on Zanesh for 12 kills now. That is farm. However, there are certain bosses that even, some of the best guilds will still wipe on. You'll still have, Limit or Future or the other guild. They'll still wipe on Zanesh every now and then. It's something that's going to happen. Clubhouse, perfect example of a guild that I was in. They got 12 of 12 fucking months ago, and they still wipe on Zanesh every now and then. They'll go in and have a bad night and wipe on Zanesh for like 2 hours. It's something that can happen. And obviously this fight in particular, you make one mistake, the whole raid dies. That is a little bit harder to come back from. Other fights, you don't get that. Raw Den, you can have somebody make a mistake, they die, you still kill the boss. So this one is a little bit more isolated. So we tend to give it a little bit more flack. But clarification for me for Meeps. Do you want the Jay the player answer or Jay the guild management answer?
Jay the raid leader.
Oh shit. Okay.
Buckle up. We're gonna be here a while.
No, it's pretty quick. I don't like farm.
Oh,
If we could go in raid night number 1 and literally lock out until everything's dead, I totally would. I am all about prog raid. I do not like farm at all. Repeat kills are a fucking pain in my ass. That being said, I know what you're thinking right now. This guy's gonna be our tank in Shadowlands? What the fuck? We're gonna have to get a backup tank for when he decides not to show up for farm? No, I'll be there. Don't worry. All been said. Oh, go ahead.
I agree. I hate farm as well, but I understand the necessity of it because there's only so many drops each time you kill a boss, and you need some power creep to finish off the later bosses. Every guild needs that power creep. Except, well, even the high-end guilds, they'll go buy that power creep by hitting the auction house and getting their corruptions early.
Or split runs.
But the bottom line is the end bosses are tuned to have gear. And that's the necessity of farm raiding.
Yeah. But as far as where it goes, like prog versus farm, I am a pig in shit when I'm in a prog raid. You know, learning it with my guild for the first time. Even if it's a boss I hate, like Carapace Phase 2, if I could bench myself, I totally would. I will lead from watching Discord streams if you guys will allow me to sit myself on fucking Carapace. That's how much I hate that fight. Anyway, but I love the fucking prog raiding. I don't like the farm. As a raid leader, though, there's an interesting thing that happens when you look at the guild roster and you're trying to figure out who do you want to bring in for a certain boss. I just realized that this might be a really fucking long answer, so I don't know how much detail you want out of this.
I think you're about to answer the next question that I was going to lead into. Who to bench?
Yeah, I was pretty much going to answer all of that. Yeah. So, for me, it's pretty easy. I just go to the officer chat and I say, hey guys, this is my 20 I'm thinking. Any changes? And then the officers will tell me, no, Sitnik, he's hot garbage, and put somebody else in. And I'll be like, okay, who? And they'll be like, bag a fart with a paper bag and release it. Use that.
Yikes.
Or
and
something
that's
else.
what Nick says to you, actually.
Yeah, the funny part is that's Nick's suggestion.
Right.
Anyway, so that's the easy raid leader answer is I just pick my 20 based on, and here's the criteria. Here's the why it's a long answer. I look at a bunch of different factors, and this is one of those things that takes up the majority of my time outside of raid, and why sometimes people don't get answers right away, or, you know, some miscommunication happens. The things that I look at, number 1, attendance. Are you going to be here? How often do you post out? Have you had attendance issues in the past? How frequent was it? And how long was the attendance issue? If it was 1 week, or if it's one night every 6-7 weeks, okay, you're fine. Don't worry about it. If you're a guy who's posted out once every 4 raid nights, I'm not going to have you on prog. Period. Because you're not reliable. If that boss takes us 4 nights, you're gone for one of the nights, somebody else has to take your spot, and we have to waste 30 minutes, an hour, learning the fight with them, or them learning the fight. So that's one major thing that I look at. Second thing is comp. Raid comp, unfortunately, is a thing. More importantly with tanks and healers than DPS. I wholeheartedly believe that you can kill any boss with any comp as long as you have the appropriate number of healers, tanks, and DPS that you need to kill the fight. You can't just go in with 40 or 20 disc priests and clear all of 12-12. Maybe you can. Cappy, assemble the boys. We're all going disc. Anyway. Comp does matter to a degree, but only in the sense of the skeleton crew of the raid. 2 tanks, 4 healers, 14 DPS. I'm not good with the numbers. I think we established that. So you you have that. If it's a fight that you just can't have 10 melee on, then yeah. If you're a melee and you're the lowest on the meters, or you post out once every 8 weeks and assuming everything else is equal, you're probably the one getting sat. I would like to say that I don't bring personal bias into it at all, but I'm human, so I can't say that and be telling the absolute truth. What I will say is I try my best to make sure that personal bias doesn't come into it at all. That being said, if you want to send me gold, it's jpriest@Hygel. We have one opening next week because TM Sad posted out both days. Hit me up. Jokes aside, though, that the attendance is a major thing. Comp, not really so much, but it can depending on the fight. This current fight, yeah, you can't have 10 melee. I mean, you could, but it's going to take fucking forever. And it's going to be a pain in the ass.
And there's a reason I'm on my warlock and not my hunter.
Exactly. That's the other factor, is if you need a certain class for a very specific reason, unfortunately, you have to go with that. Would it make sense to have Meeps go on his hunter and bring in our warlock that's sitting on the bench? Absolutely. Except, and he knows this, so I'm not like outing him or anything, the reason why that warlock is currently sitting on the bench is because historically he has had survivability issues and number issues in raid. Now, I know he's gotten a lot of gear since then, but it's still, that's the history. So he will get a shot on N'Zoth for sure. We are going to go with 2 warlocks to start, and if he can keep up, he can keep a spot. If it becomes an issue, it's going to get one of those things. But ultimately, that determination comes down to those key factors that I had first mentioned. There are some people that make themselves irreplaceable in raid. I don't know if I should just say who they are, but they know who they are. It's the same people that are always the top of the meters. They are always on time to raid and generally try and be helpful. If you're doing those things, you're going to be irreplaceable to your raid. It'll go a long way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have as much raid lead experience, technically, as you guys, even though I do a lot of the fun runs and stuff like that, and I used to be for Perdition and a little bit of Psi. But for me, the biggest thing was mechanically, and I'm not talking just raw damage. More specifically for Prog, I was more worried about having 20 people that could adapt to the situation, because that's usually what I would do at certain points. Even Jay can, attest this. There have been a lot of times where I'll make a random split call in like a farm raid or like when I was raid leading. Sometimes it worked, and a majority of the time it ended up killing us because I usually had an adaptive playstyle based on what we had. So the fact that I would always look at a raid and be like, who are, in my opinion, mechanically the most reliable 20 people? That's usually what I would build my old rosters off of. Second was attendance for me, and then third was raw numerical value. I never really valued comp, especially when I was in Perdition, because we only had 20 people, and it was, if someone was gone, we just didn't raid, and that happened, I think, like twice ever, because we were all just so committed and all just sitting on our asses doing nothing with our lives, but that's beyond the point. I would never consider, needing a class. And now that I've learned a lot more about the game, that's definitely a thing. Having warlocks for N'Zoth and Carapace is really fucking nice. Having them when we were doing Il'gynoth for getting across in our organs was really fucking nice. Is it necessary? No, I bet there's a guild that could do it without it. But those classes bring a lot. So if I was to worry about raid leading right now, I think my first thing would be attendance. Then it would be how mechanically solid other players. Then it would be comp. And then very last, I would think about numerical value, unless I thought there was an outlier. And obviously some people know that they're an outlier whether or not they're on the top and they're always at raid for certain reasons, or if they're on the lower end fighting for a position. And there also have been some people, just as a side note, that have been at that lower area, and we take them and they perform really well suddenly, and then they end up earning a spot permanently, which has happened with a couple people, which is really, really nice thing to see. But if I was a raid leader right now, I think that's where my priority would shift to. But I guess I've definitely had different thoughts in the past.
Yeah, personally, I've you guys have heard me preach it all along, is I don't give a fuck about your numbers until you've got the mechanics down. Like, and on top of that, there's one name, he didn't even raid with us anymore, but there was one person above all that I could, like, that I always look to for mechanics or to, like you said, be adaptive in a situation, and that was Zachary. Like, we've got our issues with him, and he doesn't raid with us anymore, but he's by far the most adaptive raider we've ever had. And, like, that was just, like, even if he was bad numerically, which he wasn't, but even if he'd been bad numerically, I would have wanted him in all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just certain players that you want in a raid, and I'm talking players, not classes, that you just want in a raid because you know that, you know, they're going to do something, or if the need arises for them to do something, they can, at the drop of a hat, do it. That's something I realized very quickly with Air. I already gave him praise earlier for his thing on Raw Den, but he was a trial when he did that. I mean, he could have very easily, you know, thought like, well, it's not my job. I'm not assigned to do it. And if I do it, I'm going to be covering up for somebody else's mistake. You know, some guilds might not like that. They might like me to just do my job, and they might not notice that I covered up for somebody else or whatever. Like, those are the sorts of things that kind of makes you stand out as a raider. And at the time, he was not doing well numerically. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, he's doing well numerically right now.
Yeah.
So we knew it was going to happen, but it was one of those things that just, if you've got that, you got that flexibility, that ability to just take a mechanic on its dime and do it, then that's fantastic. Also, really quickly, Rise had mentioned that sometimes he would make a call. I just realized the overlay doesn't say Kyle, so I was like, that's going to confuse people. Because I'm the only person here unoriginal enough to have their own name as their character name. Anyway, so Rise had mentioned that sometimes, you know, he would make a call and it would just sometimes be the wrong call. I don't necessarily think that there is such a thing as a wrong call unless you're literally telling people like, okay, the way to avoid this mechanic is get smashed by the tentacle. Like that's just wrong, right? But I think what happens for you, and this is from hopefully an objective third party just looking and analyzing afterwards, is you look at things in a very, at least in the raid, a very idealistic sense where you have something that's going to happen. Maybe you see it telegraphing. You're like, oh, this is going to go badly. I need to make an adaptation right now. So you make that adaptation and you call out your change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually,
that would work great if every player was like that. Here's the problem. You don't take into account the current raid that you're in. You're in a raid with a bunch of people that have apparatuses set up on their chest so that they don't get the drool all the way down their chest on their nice shirt.
We're in Sky after all.
Yeah, but that's my point. So you're expecting them on a dime to like pick up what you're saying and immediately do it without that time delay of us all being completely dumb and being like, wait, what did he say? He wants us to do what? Oh, we just wiped. Okay. Hey, what were you saying? Yeah, take 2 steps to your left. Oh.
I said
that's why you said. That's why you said take 2 steps to your left.
I thought you wanted me to jump 3 times. Shit.
Yeah. So while in the moment, that I think is what caused those issues and why you might think like, oh, those are bad calls. They're not bad calls. They're great calls if everybody is fucking laser focused and just can on a dime do, even if they don't see what you're talking about, just do it and react to save the raid. Fantastic. The way that I raid lead, and which leads us to the next question, I guess, but the way that I raid lead is I assume everybody's a complete idiot and I dumb it down as best I can. Obviously, not everybody's a complete idiot, just everybody but me. So you just Fuck, I almost made it through without laughing. Obviously, not everybody's an idiot, but if you go into that approach without insulting them all on a podcast where they're probably all going to listen to it later and roast you, if you take that approach, you don't have to worry about that wondering if they're going to pick up on it, you know? So
yeah, I actually completely agree because I was actually going to lead into talking about raid lead styles because my raid lead style was to try to iron out a strategy and have it like on paper ahead of time. So like cooldown rotations, exactly where the markers are, what people are doing, what interrupt order for every little thing. That way the fight goes on a script, in my opinion, because like from a DPS perspective, I feel like every fight should be scripted. When I get really comfortable with the fight, and more so when I'm prepping to go into a fight, I'm sitting there staring at logs, trying to see what are the other, for Elemental Shaman right now, which was I'm playing, what are the other Elemental Shamans doing? Where are they standing? What does the raid comp look like? What are people doing? Where are the tanks? Where are the healers? Who are the healers healing? Where are they using their cooldowns? What times? Like, why are they using them? All that kind of stuff. And then once I get into the raid and the mechanics start to come out, I usually am trying to be very vocal because I am more so a reactionary player. So I have, my own little nuances where I'm sitting doing my thing and I'm looking at the cooldown timers. I see something's going to happen. So I'll call for something, or I see someone's getting chosen by a certain ability. So I tell them to go somewhere, and I play very reactionally. And maybe I could attribute some of that to me playing a lot of RTS when I was younger. But yeah, I think that if you're able to get into a raid scenario and you understand the fight at a basic level, and then once you start learning it more and more, as long as you can be reactive, then you can be very successful. And that's, I guess, what I try to push off to other people when I'm raid leading. So, yeah, that's just kind of my style, is just be really vocal, talk about everything, and then get to the point where everyone's comfortable, and then just nothing has to be said. And then the only thing that has to be said is when we need to adapt.
Yeah.
Hence the call-outs.
My preferred style is to literally, like I said, assume everybody's an idiot, and then literally explain from second one until the end of the fight exactly what's going to happen, exactly when, and how you're supposed to react, and if this happens, do something differently, and like literally like a branching dialogue tree in an RPG game of like 7,000 different options at the end of it. And ultimately, one of the other officers will be like, Jay, you're rambling. Shut the hell up. Let's pull.
One of the other officers.
We've been here for an hour and a half and haven't pulled the boss yet. So, obviously I had to tamper that a little bit, and I'm trying to get better. That being said, I think right now what we're doing is really good, making sure that we have strat talk with the power roles, healers, tanks, officers, and then just go into the boss. And if it's segmented by phases, unless we think that we have a shot of getting through the fight in like a couple pulls, literally explain phase 1, go. As soon as you get to phase 2, all right, cool, do what you want, we'll wipe, and then explain phase 2. Cool, get through that. Cool, now we're at phase 3. Here's what we're going to do in phase 3, and then learn like incrementally like that. Some bosses don't work like that, like Il'gynoth. You literally explain the whole fight in about 35 seconds. Unless you're me, then it's just like 4.5 minutes. But yeah, as far as like in raid making calls or whatever, you would think that I would be talking the entire time, but rather my style is to not say anything at all, ever. I would prefer to not talk during the raid at all, except for major callouts that need to happen. Right now, I call out like Tentacle in 5. I'd rather not do that.
Yeah, let the boss mobs do
make
that.
sure kill the ads. Yeah, exactly. I would rather just... You have DBM, or you have that really annoying mixed sounds mixer thing that goes boing. What the fuck does that mean? I don't know. I just said boing and somebody just popped a hellstone.
Right.
What about you, Meeps?
So I haven't raid led since Tomb, and my style would not be the same as then. It'd be something similar to Jay's. Back then, I was just angry and expected people to know what the fuck to do, and me just do callouts. Now it's more of I would know everything ahead of time because I like to get into the raids early. Like, say it's release day and we're gonna raid that night. I'm on an alt doing the raid in a pug earlier in the day because I want first-hand experience with the fights. That way I know, like, not only do I know from whatever videos people have made, but I know firsthand why why we do the things we do in a fight. I don't want to just know that this is what we need to do, but why we need to do it. So that's firsthand, is I want to understand the whole of a fight and then give a brief explanation in each area. So like, this is, all right, range DPS, you're going to be doing this phase 1, this phase 2. You got it? Anyone that doesn't got it, message me. I'll fill you in. Just don't be afraid. If you have questions, ask. Healers, this is what you do. Or, well, I'd leave that to Ponju. Fuck that. He can do all that. He's really good at it. We've got a great healing core with him at the lead. But you get the idea. Is just a brief breakdown of each of the sections to each, individual role, and then go. And then we run into it. We see the mistakes, and then take all the questions in, explain why things are happening and what we need to do to prevent the bad shit. Is how I would raid lead now, if I absolutely had to, with a gun to my head. I am more than happy to let Jay take over the hour and a half, explanations, as long as I can be like, Jay, shut the fuck up. Yeah, get it, let's go.
It needs to happen every now and then.
Yeah. I think that happens
But,
for everyone.
I'm sure people have actually noticed that unless it's like Tina, when we were doing farm, we would go to Tina, and that would be like the only boss for the last couple of weeks. That's like the only boss I would talk on farm. Obviously, Drestagath was still prog because it was less than 3 kills and all that stuff. But yeah, aside from like, feed this one, don't feed this one, feed this one, because like that shit, like, we all have DBM. I want to just I want to pump, like I'm playing a Shadow Priest and I'm raid leading. Like, you've literally got me the 2 worst fucking jobs together. I'm gonna be subpar at both. Like, let me at least do one of them right.
Wow, I guess this podcast spawned an officer discussion, because now I'm going to talk to you about that. You want me to do call-outs? I mean, we can talk about this later. Like, I don't mind doing the call-outs.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm down with it. I mean, we could talk about that as well for Shadowlands too, because I was going to bring it up officer meeting at some point, but that was good. If anybody in the officer group, Nick and Ponju included, if they are still listening, if any of you wants to raid lead, this is not a dictatorship where I'm like, I'm the raid leader and that's all. Like, I'm okay giving up on that and just tanking and doing some other officerly duties, or I don't know if we're gonna rotate GM like we always do, or just let fucking Kyle do it, Rise do it, unless he decides that he doesn't want a GM anymore, but he'll raid lead instead and we can swap it up or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're getting pretty close to the end of the topic. So I actually have one for the chat and obviously for the YouTube comments or any other comment locations. Question for you based on some stuff that we were talking about earlier that I'm curious about some of your guys' feedback for. As far as being in a guild, what is the hardest situation that you've had to deal with? Whether you were directly affected or, there was something going on and you felt like you were a part of it in some way. Or maybe you weren't, but like, what's the hardest scenario that you've ever had to deal with as part of a guild? Again, one of the ones that I would talk about most is my time in Perdition. Suddenly going to a raid lead position and then feeling like I had a million questions from people like, what are we doing on this fight? Where do you want me to stand? What are our healing cooldowns? What are the tanks doing? What kind of strategy are we going to do? All of those things put me in a really, really hard position to like feel like I knew the answers for everything when I didn't. And that definitely took me a long time to get into. Another small one that I would mention is relatively recently trying to figure out with people, some of our old raiders that we had, having them come back and being like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still down to raid. And being like, okay, that puts us in kind of an awkward position, coming back and we have like 6 healers or we have, our roster already set up and all this stuff. Sometimes that can be a hard decision to do, but we usually get it figured out pretty quick, or we try to adapt as best we can. But There are definitely some decisions that are much harder than others. So I'm curious about what you guys have to say, and then also what the chat and the YouTube comments have to say.
Mine. I'm gonna surprise you by giving you a quick and dirty answer.
Okay.
And yes, this one will be quick. I promise. Hellfire
We'll see.
Citadel, doing every fight on Prague and being benched for Archimonde.
Ooh.
That was the hardest thing I've had to deal with.
Hmm.
So that was my answer. That was the quick and dirty. That's where that you can stop timing me now. That was quick and dirty. Surprise over. That's why, Raiders, if you're listening, when I tell you I know it sucks, I've been there. I literally have fucking been there. I had to do ramparts, okay? I had to do Hellfire ramparts. Don't tell me about hard. Anyway, all of Citadel progging, and then having to sit on Archimonde because you were the last mage, and you don't need that many. So for comp, you got cut.
Oof.
Yep.
What about you, Meeps?
The hardest thing I've ever had to do was leave simple math. It was my home for 2 years. I was definitely ingrained in that community. I still like go to their website from time to time. It's a whole nother group of people, but still the people that formed the guild in vanilla still frequent the site. We still chat. We're still on the forums. Like that was a big part of why I wanted to form a community along with a raiding guild, because that community is still alive since 2004. So deciding to leave them because at the time progression was more important to me, that was the hardest thing. But yeah, anyone that's watching this or will watch it on YouTube, go ahead, feel free to leave any comments on what was the hardest thing as part of a raiding guild you've done. We'd love to hear from you, and you can find us on the Simply WoW podcast channel now on YouTube. And I'd like to thank you all for listening. Not only can you find us on YouTube, you can also listen to us on Anchor or Spotify. Just look up the Simply WoW podcast, and keep it simple. Y'all have a good night.
Have a good one, guys. Keep it simple.
Bye.